Hi, I'm Jack Jose. I'm the board president of Ohio Students for Gun Legislation, a registered 501c4 political advocacy group. Welcome to our podcast, where we talk with experts working to prevent gun violence. We share advice, we share strategies, we share legislative ideas, and we offer steps that you can take to reduce the devastating toll that guns take on American lives each year. And today we're speaking with Morgan Showen. And here to introduce our guest is Ohio Students for Gun Legislation Northeast Regional Coordinator, Connor Murat.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Jack, for that introduction. I'm super excited to be sitting down with Morgan Showen, a candidate for the Ohio State Representative from the 54th District. The 54th District is a little outside of Cincinnati, encompasses towns like Lebanon and Mason. Morgan is running against a Republican incumbent, Paul Zeltwager. Morgan does have a pretty extensive resume, which makes us super excited to endorse him in this cycle. He played football in high school and had a job at King's College to pay his way through college. He mobilized his fellow high school students right here in Cincinnati to make visits to both the offices of Senator Rob Portman and Congressman Steve Chabot on the subject of healthcare. These office visits would be the founding moment for what Morgan would build into Cincinnati Indivisible, a high school organization that would make congressional office visits on issues ranging from climate change to immigration while providing a voice for those so often ignored in politics. And now he's ready to work within the system in the Ohio Statehouse, and we are so excited to get him into office. And Morgan, if you want to take a minute to tell us a little bit about yourself, why you decided to get into this race, and what the state of the race is looking like down there.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for the introduction and the opportunity, and for most of all, your support in this race. It means so much to have a committed group of young people and those on the board at our backs. So it means so much for me personally. As someone, as you mentioned, who got involved early on, I made the first congressional office visit, like you said, before I was 18, and it takes a huge step of kind of faith in yourself and faith that you can really make an impact. To be able to take that initial first step when you haven't been around in the political system for so many years. So I can't applaud this group enough, and for all those people that are working to make change. So like Connor said, I am running in District 54, which covers Lebanon and Mason. I went to Lebanon High School. I worked at Kings Island right around the corner for about 5 years, working every summer to pay for college at the University of Michigan, where I am currently a senior, actually. So that's where I'm currently coming to you from, is up here in Ann Arbor. So that's where I've been working the last couple of years. I did a lot of work within the Michigan State Legislature as well over the past couple of years, working to enact policy proposals that I've also been recently published for, related to student voting rights and green energy. So that's been a little of my focus up here as well. And then back home in Ohio, I worked on the campaigns of Aftab Pureval and State Senator Joe Schiavone when he ran for governor in 2018. So I've been super excited to be a part of all the things that I have done. And now we're taking this step in these final 77 days at this point, to be able to close out this election cycle and to be really to add a gun sense majority to the State House.
Yeah, of course. And, I think it's really amazing. I think, it's really important that we get a lot of young people involved in politics, and you're obviously the go-to guy for that. And I think it's really cool that you're still in college and now you're running to make change. So the first question we always ask the candidates we interview, I know this is not how Congress works in Ohio, but if you could enact one policy today on gun legislation, what would that policy be and why?
Yeah, if I can enact any starting point, I think that we got to start with where the vast majority of Ohioans already agree, which is 90+% of all Ohioans agree that every single sale of a firearm should have a background check, and that we should be able to know exactly where that firearm is going to, and particularly prevent that from falling into the wrong hands of those that are convicted of domestic violence and those that are likely to commit harm with said firearm. And so I think that is an easy, immediate first step that is utterly ridiculous that we can't get passed on both a national and a state level, considering the overwhelming majority of Americans who support these kind of bills, but then where we have legislators who are entrenched into districts that have been gerrymandered to benefit uh, political action groups like the NRA. And so we need to be able to have just the common sense proposals that the vast majority of, like I said, Ohioans and Americans both agree on as a first step. And then I think there's also the things we can do to go from there to lower our overall gun violence rate statewide and nationwide.
I want to drill down on that. I've been curious about this. Almost every candidate we've talked about has said the same thing you're saying. And any gun owner you talk to is like, well, of course there have to be background checks. Why not just write a single issue bill and just pass this universal background check and maybe spend some money so you don't get into the Charleston loophole issue where people who have to wait more than 3 days get their guns without a background check? Is there anything stopping us from doing a single issue like that and moving forward, at least in the state of Ohio?
I don't think there's anything stopping us from having the courage of our conviction to be able to propose a single issue bill like that. And I think that that's what the Ohio House Democratic Caucus supported and did after the Dayton shooting last August. But then we had the competing interests. We had the Governor DeWine wanting to do a watered down version of his Strong Ohio bill that doesn't accomplish anywhere near enough of how far we need to go. And then we had those like my opponent and our current representative in District 54, Paul Zeltwanger, who thought it was a great idea to propose standard ground legislation following Dayton, a type of bill that has been shown time and time again to increase homicide by gun in the states where it has been enacted. And so we're being poisoned in the state by those who are falling into such a tiny minority of viewpoints on this issue, where the entire supermajority in the Statehouse has been able to be locked down by those who don't share the same values and the same beliefs as the rest of the state.
And it feels like it's almost become so polarized, like so much of our politics has, that even backing this background check bill is considered anti-gun.
Yes.
And then everyone must perform, Republicans, I'm going to say largely, feel like they have to perform pro-gun, and others have to perform anti-gun, and then suddenly you're not having a useful conversation.
Yeah.
I want to jump off what Jack said there. Americans, and especially Ohioans, and I've just noticed this in my own family, we've become increasingly almost scared of how polarized we've become as a country on any issue, but especially when we're talking about gun control. And obviously these past few months in this pandemic, we've obviously seen the importance of bipartisanship. So how can we trust that you're going to be a bipartisan voice in the Statehouse, and how is that going to help you make change?
Yeah, I'll do that by sharing a bit of a story first for kind of how our district has played out in previous years, and then how we're running this campaign and the kinds of voters that we've been able to talk to and to flip to our campaign in these final months. So District 54 has never gone blue in the last 10 years. It's been solidly red. In 2014 and 2016, these are the first two elections where Representative Zeltwanger was on the ballot. He won with approximately 70% of the vote both times. And that might seem like an insurmountable hurdle. There's no way we can win this district. It's becoming it's already way too red. But then we saw in 2018, there was over a 7% jump towards the Democratic side, where we had almost 39% of the total vote came out for the Democratic candidate, Nikki Foster. So we had a shift within our district, but at the same time, we know that to get that final 10% to go across the hurdle on November 3rd, we're going to have to attract voters that are not Democrats or traditional Democratic voters. We're going to have to talk to Republicans, Libertarians, and Conservatives, and to be able to get them onto our side. And one of the ways that we've been able to do that is simply to be able to talk about the kind of extremist rhetoric that continues to come forth from our current state representative. I'll give you an example of someone we've highlighted recently in a couple of events for our campaign. His name is Mike. He works for a contracting company that works pretty closely with Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, doing a lot of work related to biodiagnostics and epidemiological studies. Now, you might think that's probably very applicable to the current climate that we live in with the pandemic, and it is. And so he reached out to Representative Zeltwanger to be able to simply share his expertise and provide any kind of guidance he could, as Representative Zellweger was appointed to be chairman of the task force that was responsible for the economic recovery in the state of Ohio. And he never heard back. And he reached out again, and never heard back. And then finally, he saw that our opponent had called for the resignation of Dr. Amy Acton. And that just sent him over the roof. He's like, I am a conservative, I'm a libertarian, I'm 31 years old, I've always voted Republican, I love Mike DeWine. But man, come on, we need somebody who's going to be able to accept science and facts and the basic tenets of the safety of public health at large. And I think that that's kind of the same thing we're going to see in this election at large. The more we tell people in our district about the kinds of values that our representative holds, they might not agree with me on every single issue. And we're going to be able to work and we're going to be able to talk about that. But at the very least, they want someone who's going to A, show up, and B, is going to listen to them, and C, is going to actually listen to the scientists. So I think that's kind of the message that we're going to be able to take across our district, and to be able to show that we are going to be a bipartisan campaign, and that'll be a bipartisan representative in the Statehouse.
I want to give you a chance to expand on that. You know, I come from a Republican family. Both of my parents voted, red in every election that they've been around for. But now they're both kind of considering voting for President Biden because they don't like President Trump. So now you have a lot of these hardline conservatives, especially in places like your district, that are moving over to the Biden train. But what is your appeal to them, to these hardline Republicans, to say, hey, you need to vote Democratic all the way down the ballot? What's your appeal?
Yeah, I think it starts with what has happened over the last 10 years in the Statehouse in relation to what does a supermajority do to a political party in power. And we start with the fact that over the last two election cycles, 2018 and 2020, we've seen twice that the Republican Speaker of the Ohio House has been forced to resign after the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, was required to get involved due to corruption allegations and pay-to-play scandals. One for issues related to payday lending companies, and the other related to energy companies like First Energy in your area and in Northeast Ohio. So we have to be able to talk about the fact that the supermajority that the Republican Party has built through gerrymandering in Columbus is no longer looking out for the people that put them in office. They're looking out for themselves, accepting large bribes, and focused in on this culture of corruption that exists within the Statehouse. And I think that people are just generally overall tired of seeing that time and time again, we can't have anyone from, if it's your own political party or otherwise, actually represent the people when they get to Columbus, instead of trying to prioritize their own personal businesses, their financial interests, or their political interests when they get there. So I think that your parents and then other people like them across the country, and we're seeing this in so many polls that put Vice President Biden ahead of President Trump, is that people are simply looking for someone that they think they can trust to put in the job and that actually cares about them. This is why Senator Brown continues to win re-election in states that will not elect another statewide Democratic candidate on the ballot. It's simply because they know that they can trust him to go and work for them, and no matter if they don't agree on every issue, that he'll be a fighter for them and them alone.
Right, and Sharon is an excellent example of a red state liberal. You can't question his liberal credentials, and you can't question his popularity here in Ohio. That's a great point. I want to say that as we were researching the show, in addition to now knowing your full resume and wanting to be you when I grow up, before you came on, which by the way, I realize I've missed the bus. But Connor and I were remarking at how really robust your platform is. That I think that you probably have the most robust, detailed platform of any of the candidates we've spoken to, including congressional candidates. Really, we were appreciative of your gun sense section. So, and I noticed that you were willing to just say that we would adopt the March for Our Lives change plan. And we would adopt the Giffords Law Center regulations. And I was really impressed by your willingness to do that. Would you talk about the thinking that went into not, instead of wanting to wordsmith it and make it your own and make it the Morgan Showen platform, to just say, look, so what was your thinking behind that choice?
Certainly. So I think there's a couple of things that go into just the platform at large. We'll talk a little bit about all the issues for why we went so detailed in the first place, and then we'll drill down in on the gun violence section. As a younger candidate myself, I understand that there are different parameters and different requirements that voters expect of you, and that they are quicker to be able to potentially judge you for your young age and to be inexperienced and not able to do the job per se. And that we need to be able to demonstrate on day one that I can put together a team around me to be able to put forward these plans to go and use the resources that are available, that very credible and accomplished activist groups like the Giffords Law Center and the March for Our Lives group have already put together. They've already done the work to be able to set that apart. And so we put together a policy team from the very beginning, knowing that that was going to be a heavy emphasis for this campaign, is that we wanted to be able to show that this was the exact things we would be going to office to do. Because so often we hear these sort of vague promises that are thrown about, I'll create smaller government, or I'll lower taxes generally, or I want to stamp out corruption or otherwise. What does that mean? What is that actually going to accomplish if you don't lay it out specifically for people? And voters aren't dumb. They can read through this language. They're able to understand exactly what we're saying on the platform. And so we're proud to be able to showcase exactly what our campaign is running on, what we stand for, and what we want to be able to accomplish, and then provide the facts and the reasoning behind each of those points for how they'll benefit the lives of everyday Ohioans, make us a more economically robust state, make us a safer state, and a place that we can be proud to call home.
Yeah, I love it. But, this problem of gun violence, in my opinion, is uniquely American, right? You go into other European countries that don't have a Second Amendment in their respective constitutions, and they don't have this problem. And Representative Zellswinger, he's been endorsed by the Ohioans for the right to carry, and he's come out in strong support of the Second Amendment. So how can we keep our community safe while still supporting our Constitution?
Certainly. I think this goes back to the Heller decision in, I believe, 2008. It's simply that while the Second Amendment absolutely guarantees the right to keep and bear arms generally, the individual states still have and retain the right to regulate the ownership of those firearms, and to be able to provide for basic gun safety measures that can be expected on a state level, and to be able to ensure that this isn't a free-for-all, that you don't simply have the right to own a bazooka or to own these high-powered weapons of war that are on our streets. And so I think that balance is something that we're absolutely able to find in our country, and I think that parts of our nation have been able to find it so far. But it is something that we need to continue working towards, and Ohio has a long, long way to come. We still didn't pass a single gun safety law after Dayton last year. We're still just sitting on our hands, and we get to watch the passive tweets that come out from the governor on the anniversary of Dayton saying, we need to pass this bill that I proposed almost a year ago, to no real effect other than just him showcasing the issue. And so we have so much work to be able to do, and it's going to require a complete change in leadership in Columbus to make that happen.
I think the radical option that we have, is to show that government can do something, right? We talked several weeks ago with Desiree Timms, who was spurred by the shooting in her city to run for Congress. And, that do something chant that interrupted the governor's, attempt at solemnity following the Dayton shooting is not born of disrespect for the dead. It's born of this just a frustration with the idea that the governor came down here, gave a great speech, proposed 13 or 15 really sensible positions. We endorsed the tweet. We said we love it. this should happen. But then he threw up his hands and said, "Oh, what can you do at the Statehouse?" But who's the lead Republican, right? And so this idea that we're recursively in a system that doesn't work, and you hear, I think that whether it's a Tea Party conservative or it's a Bernie bro, what the frustration seems to be is do something, that there's a mechanism, there's an apparatus to change the law. And it seems like that's where a Morgan Showen, an Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, that somebody who says, well, let's just use the tools to make change, find themselves surprising people in elections and being successful and then being effective as lawmakers because the tools are there to actually make laws.
Right.
And that is not a question.
Yeah.
I completely agree with Jack there. And speaking of using the government to make change, obviously over these past few months after the killing of George Floyd, we've been in kind of a national reckoning over our problem in this country of racism and injustice in our criminal justice system. I just wanted to see, what are your thoughts on the Black Lives Matter movement as an organization? We've been very supportive of it because obviously there are a lot of issues that intersect with gun violence and Black Lives Matter. And what can the Statehouse do to make sure that our state is as equitable as possible for, a voiceless population?
Absolutely. And we have to start with the fact that there is too often an unwillingness to recognize the fact that there is a different world that white Americans live in versus the world that Black Americans live in, simply because of the way that the system has been built to treat both populations and to advantage the overall white population. And so it starts with bills like what the Ohio House Democrats proposed in the last few months, which was to declare racism as a public health crisis, and that we need to be able to marshal all of the support and the energy we can towards combating those things that directly affect the overall health of the Black community. And that extends from things like inequitable treatment that was highlighted by the coronavirus and how the mortality rates continue to be higher among Black and Brown communities, and extends to the epidemic of gun violence, that those communities continue to be hurt the absolute worst by these weapons of war. And so we need to be able to address the fact that our country was not and must not be built on a foundation of equity, and that we need to be able to continue the overall fight to recognize that at bare minimum, and then to take corrective action to ensure that there is not simply equality, but overall equity to right the wrongs and to level the playing field for Black and white Americans and for all races. Right.
Unfortunately, we are out of time for our interview, but thank you so much for joining us, Morgan. And I'm super excited to see what the results are in election and hopefully come next term, you're the representative for District 14. Thank you to everyone who's tuning in tonight. In addition to our interview here, you can get involved by joining Ohio Students for Gun Legislation by going to our website, www.studentsforgunlegislation.org. From there, please join, organize an event with us, buy merchandise, or make a donation to help students identify and address and solve this specific issue surrounding gun violence that's affecting so many Ohioan families. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I wish you the best of luck, Morgan.
Thank you both so much for having me.
Thanks for coming on.